It was a romantic hot air balloon ride, until the balloon came down empty. The silence was the first thing that felt wrong. Not the gentle, floating quiet of the Napa dawn, but a dead, heavy silence where a sound should have been. Maria stood on the dukest grass of the landing field, a thermos of coffee clutched in her hands, her breath pluming in the chilly morning air. She was the ground crew chief, a woman whose life was tethered to the rhythms of propane burners and the gentle whoosh of nylon filling with hot air. The balloon, a magnificent silk beast named the Vow, was late. Only by 7 minutes, but in her world, 7 minutes was an eternity. It was a speck in the sky, then a proud, floating teardrop, and then, finally, a gentle giant settling onto the earth. Today, there was just an empty, pale blue sky. Her radio crackled. "Maria, you got eyes on them?" It was Ben, her second in. His voice, tinny and laced with the same thread of unease she felt twisting in her gut. "Negative, Ben. Still no visual. Any word from them? Nothing." Radio silence for the last 20. I thought, maybe their radio was out, but they should have been in sight by now. They were newlyweds. Liam and Jenna. She could see them now in her mind's eye, just an hour ago, their faces bright with a kind of delirious, infectious joy. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a smile that seemed to take up his whole face. A Wall Street guy trying to look relaxed in jeans and a fleece. She was small, ethereal, with wide, impossibly blue eyes that drank in the sight of the colossal, uninflated balloon as if it were a sleeping dragon. They'd held hands, their fingers interlaced so tightly it looked like they were trying to merge into one person. A sunrise champagne flight, he'd called it when he booked. A surprise for his bride. Their pilot, a seasoned veteran named Gus, had clapped Liam on the back and promised them a ride they'd never forget. Maria raised her binoculars, her hands unsteady. She scanned the horizon, tracing the path they should have taken over the rolling, vine-covered hills. Nothing. The sun was higher now, burning off the last of the morning mist, and the valley was bathed in a clean golden light that felt mocking. In its serenity, maybe the wind shifted. Ben's voice crackled again. Pushed them south. Gus would have called in, Maria said, her voice tight. He always calls in a course correction. Always. It was a rule drilled into every pilot. No exceptions. Safety was a religion in this business. A knot of pure, cold dread was tightening in her stomach. This was wrong, deeply, fundamentally wrong. She could feel it in her bones, the same way she could feel an approaching storm. She'd been in this business for 30 years, since she was a teenager helping her father, and she had never, not once, lost a balloon. "I'm going up," she said, making a decision. "Get the chopper ready now." The helicopter ride was a blur of noise and vibration. The thwomp-thwomp-thwomp of the rotor blades, a frantic heartbeat against the terrifying silence from the sky. Maria sat in the co-pilot's seat, her eyes glued to the landscape below. A patchwork of greens and golds that seemed impossibly peaceful. Every shadow, every glint of light, made her heart leap into her throat. Was that it? No, just a greenhouse, a water tower, a tarp on a roof. They flew the balloon's intended flight path, then circled wider, then wider still. Ben was on the phone in the back, coordinating with local authorities, his voice a low, urgent murmur. The minutes stretched. Into an hour, the sun climbed higher, glaring off the helicopter's windshield. The hope that had been a flickering candle flame in her chest was sputtering, threatening to go out. And then they saw it. It wasn't the vibrant, celebratory crimson and gold of the Vow. It was a flash of white, a ghostly shape draped over the dense canopy of an isolated grove of oak trees on a remote, inaccessible ridge. It looked like a shroud. "There," the pilot shouted, pointing. 9 o'clock. Maria's breath hitched. As they drew closer, the shape resolved itself. It was the balloon, or what was left of it. The vast envelope of ripstop nylon was torn and shredded, tangled in the gnarled branches of the ancient oaks, like a captured sail. It was utterly, eerily still. The basket, the heavy wicker gondola that had carried 3 souls into the sky, was nowhere to be seen. "Circle it," Maria commanded, her voice hoarse. Lower. The helicopter descended, the downdraft whipping the tattered remains of the balloon into a frantic, ghostly dance. Maria's eyes scanned the wreckage, her mind racing. Where was the basket? It was heavy, reinforced with a steel frame. It wouldn't just disintegrate, it had to have detached. But how? The stainless steel carabiners that connected the basket to the envelope were rated for thousands of pounds of force. They didn't just break there, Ben said. His voice strained, pointing towards the base of the ridge. Look, wedged in a deep ravine, almost completely obscured by overgrown manzanita bushes, was the basket. It was on its side, scarred and battered from the impact. One side was caved in, the wickerwork splintered like broken bones. The propane burners were twisted and mangled. The champagne bucket was still there, miraculously upright, a single unopened bottle of Dom Perignon nestled inside. But the basket was empty. A wave of nausea washed over Maria. She grabbed the radio handset, her knuckles white. This is Ground Chief Maria Flores. We have located the wreckage of N417VB. I repeat, we have located the wreckage. The envelope is on the ridge, the basket is in the ravine below. There are no signs of the pilot or the passengers. The basket is empty. The word hung in the air, a final, damning judgment. Empty. The rescue team rappelled down the steep, unstable slope of the ravine. Maria watched from the helicopter, hovering above, feeling utterly helpless. The scene below was a tableau of controlled chaos. Men in bright orange vests moved with practiced efficiency, their voices carrying faintly on the wind. They documented everything, every splinter of wicker, every scuff mark, every piece of twisted metal. The area was cordoned off with yellow tape, turning a piece of wild, beautiful nature into a crime scene. Because that's what it felt like, not an accident, a crime. Maria knew Gus. She'd known him for 20 years. He was meticulous, cautious. To a fault, he was a man who checked his knots 3 times and recited safety protocols in his sleep. He would not have flown into a storm. He would not have allowed a structural failure. And he would never, ever abandon his passengers. If the balloon was going down, he would have stayed with it. He would have fought to the very end to protect the people in his care. She landed the helicopter in a makeshift clearing, her legs unsteady. As she stepped onto the ground, a sheriff's deputy, a young man with a grim, set face, met her. "Ma'am, I'm Deputy Miller. We need to ask you a few questions." She nodded, numb. She answered his questions mechanically. The names of the passengers, Liam and Jenna Hale. The pilot, Gus Armstrong. The launch time. The intended flight path. The last time she'd had contact. Every word felt like a betrayal. A sterile, official record of a morning that had begun with such joy and had ended in this nightmare. Did the passengers seem normal? Deputy Miller asked, his pen poised over his notepad. Maria's mind flashed back to the pre-dawn darkness, Jenna's wide, excited eyes, Liam's easy, confident smile. The way they'd looked at each other, as if the rest of the world didn't exist. They were newlyweds, she said, her voice cracking. They were happy. The search went on for days. Dogs, drones, volunteers on foot. They combed every inch of the rugged terrain. They found a shoe, a woman's designer flat, caught in a thorn bush, half a mile from the crash site. It was They found a man's fleece jacket, Liam's, snagged on a barbed wire fence even further away. But they found no bodies, no blood, no signs of a struggle. It was as if 3 people had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the ghost of a balloon and a few scattered, heartbreaking remnants of their final morning together. The media descended like vultures. The story was irresistible. The beautiful, wealthy young couple on their honeymoon, the romantic, tragic setting. The baffling, inexplicable mystery. The vanishing vow, one headline screamed. Honeymoon horror in the sky, read another. Liam's family arrived, a formidable clan of New York elites, their faces etched with a mixture of grief and stony anger. They brought with them a high-powered lawyer and a private investigator, men who moved with an emeritory confidence that made the local sheriff's department seem like small-town amateurs. Jenna's family was different. There was only her mother, a fragile, bird-like woman named Carol, who seemed to shrink with every passing hour. She clutched a worn photograph of her daughter, her eyes red-rimmed and vacant with shock. She had no lawyers, no investigators. She just had a terrible, bottomless well of grief. Maria was interviewed, over and over. By the sheriff, by the NTSB, by the family's private investigator, a man with cold reptilian eyes, who seemed to imply that she, her company, her entire operation, was somehow responsible. She went over the details again and again, her own memory becoming a worn, frayed tape. The maintenance logs, perfect. The weather report, clear. The pilot's record, spotless. Nothing made sense. The days bled into a week. The search was officially scaled back. The national news crews packed up and moved on to the next tragedy. But for Maria, for the families, for the small community of Napa, the mystery remained, a raw, open wound. The empty balloon basket sat in a secured hangar, a silent wicker tomb. One evening, unable to sleep, Maria drove out to the landing field. The air was cool, the sky littered with stars. She stood where she had stood that morning, a lifetime ago, and looked up at the empty sky. She thought of Gus, of his calm, reassuring voice. She thought of Liam and Jenna, their hands clasped together. "Where did you go?" she whispered to the darkness. "What happened to you up there?" The only answer was the chirping of crickets and the rustle of the wind in the dry grass. The silence was no longer heavy, it was hungry. It had swallowed 3 people whole, and it wasn't giving them back. It was a silence that screamed. And as Maria stood there, alone in the dark, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. It was a feeling of profound, terrifying certainty. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mystery. This was an act of impossible, deliberate cruelty. Someone had wanted them to disappear, and they had succeeded. The cliffhanger wasn't just where they were, it was who had made them vanish. The camera of her mind pulled back, showing her small, lonely figure in the vast dark field. A silent witness to an absence that felt more powerful, more malevolent, than any presence. The story wasn't over. It had just begun. The man who called himself Liam Hale had practiced the smile in the mirror. He'd practiced it until his face ached, until the easy, confident charm felt less like a costume and more like a second skin. It was the smile of a man who had everything, a man who had never known a day of want or fear. It was a lie. The real man, the one buried deep beneath the fleece jacket and the expensive jeans, was named Ethan. And Ethan had known nothing but want and fear his entire life. His childhood was a roadmap of faded motel signs and the smell of stale cigarette smoke. His mother was a ghost, a woman who drifted through life in a haze of prescription pills and cheap whiskey, always chasing a man, a score, a feeling she could never quite catch. Ethan learned to be invisible, to read the subtle shifts in a drunkard's mood, to know when to speak and when to disappear into the woodwork. He learned to steal little things at first, a loaf of bread, a bottle of milk, then bigger things. He was good at it. He had a knack for seeing the angles, for spotting the weakness in a system. In a person, he met Liam Hale, in a place designed for second chances that rarely gave them. A juvenile detention center. Liam was everything Ethan was not. He was the son of Marcus Hale, a titan of finance, a man whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and terror on Wall Street. Liam had been born into a world of effortless privilege, of summer homes in the Hamptons and ski trips in Aspen. His crime was a moment of stupid, youthful rebellion, joyriding in his father's Porsche, a drunken crash that had, by some miracle, hurt no one but the car. Ethan was there for Grand Theft Auto, a desperate attempt to get to a new state, a new life that had ended. As it always did, with the cold, hard click of handcuffs, they became unlikely friends in the sterile, oppressive environment of the detention center. Ethan was drawn to Liam's careless confidence, the easy way he moved through the world as if it owed him everything. Liam, in turn, was fascinated by Ethan's sharp, hungry intelligence, the survivor's instinct that glittered in his eyes. For Liam, Ethan was a glimpse into a world of real danger. A world that made his own privileged problems seem petty and insignificant. For Ethan, Liam was a window into a universe he could only dream of. After their release, they stayed in touch. Ethan drifted, working odd jobs, running small-time scams, always looking for the big score that would finally set him free. Liam went to Princeton, then to his father's firm, his path laid out for him on a road paved with gold. But the friendship, strangely, endured. Liam would send Ethan money sometimes, a few $100s here and there, a gesture of charity that felt more like an insult. He would call Ethan when he was bored, wanting to hear stories from the real world. A tourist dipping his toes into the grime of Ethan's life before retreating to his clean, orderly existence. Ethan's resentment grew, a slow-burning fire in his gut. He hated Liam's condescension, his casual cruelty, the way he treated Ethan's life as a form of entertainment. But he also needed him. Liam was his only connection to the world he craved, the world of wealth and power that seemed so impossibly out of reach. The plan began to form slowly, a dark seed taking root in the fertile soil of Ethan's bitterness. It was audacious, insane, but the more he thought about it, the more it felt like the only way out. He started studying Liam, mimicking his speech patterns, his gestures, the way he held a fork. He read the books Liam read, listened to the music. He listened to bleached his hair, got colored contacts to match Liam's hazel eyes. He was a chameleon, a master of reinvention. He would become Liam Hale. Jenna was the key. He met her through one of Liam's social media posts. She was a charity worker, an idealist, the daughter of a small-town librarian. She was beautiful, but it was her gentleness, her innate goodness, that drew him in. She was the opposite of the cynical, calculating women Liam usually dated. She was pure, and she was Liam's latest obsession. Ethan began to orchestrate their meeting. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, a series of carefully engineered coincidences that made it seem like fate. He knew Liam's schedule, his habits, his favorite coffee shop. He bumped into her there, apologized profusely, and used the smile he had practiced for so long. He was charming, attentive, a perfect imitation of the man she thought she was falling for. He told her he was trying to be a better person, that her goodness inspired him. She believed him. She was a woman who wanted to see the best in people. And Ethan showed her exactly what she wanted to see. The real Liam was in Europe on a business trip. A trip Ethan had subtly encouraged. While he was gone, Ethan moved in, cementing his place in Jenna's life. He proposed quickly, a whirlwind romance, designed to give her no time to think, no time to see the cracks in his facade. He used Liam's money, Liam's credit cards, to create a fantasy of a life together. The wedding was small, private, just as she wanted. Her mother, Carol, was there, her eyes filled with tears of joy for her daughter's happiness. Ethan felt a flicker of something, a pang of guilt, as he looked at the trusting, hopeful face of the woman whose life he was about to destroy. But he pushed it down. He had come too far to turn back now. The hot air balloon ride was his idea. It was the perfect final act. Romantic, memorable, and, most importantly, remote. It was the perfect stage for a disappearance. The third person in the basket was not Gus Armstrong. The seasoned, reliable pilot, the real Gus, was at home, sick with a sudden violent stomach flu, the result of a little something Ethan had paid a disgruntled restaurant worker to slip into his lunch the day before. The man flying the balloon was a man named Dimitri, a ghost from Ethan's past. A man with no name and no morals, a man who would do anything for a price. Ethan had found him in the darkest corners of the internet, a specialist in making people disappear. Dimitri was the witness. He was a hulking, silent man with dead eyes and a map of scars on his knuckles. He had grown up in the brutal orphanages of post-Soviet Russia, a place where only the ruthless survived. He had been a soldier, a mercenary, a hired thug. He had seen the worst of humanity, and it had hollowed him out, leaving nothing but a cold, calculating machine. He trusted no one. cared for nothing but the money that would allow him to disappear to a place where his past could not find him. He watched Ethan and Jenna with a detached curiosity. He saw the way she looked at him, the pure, unadulterated love in her eyes. He saw the way Ethan looked at her, the flicker of something that might have been regret. Or perhaps just fear. Before it was masked by the practiced smile. He didn't care. It was just a job. As the balloon rose into the dawn sky, a breathtaking panorama of the valley unfolding below them, Jenna squeezed Ethan's hand. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Thank you for this, Liam. It's the most perfect morning of my life." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, the mask slipped. He saw not just a pawn in his game, but a woman, a kind, loving woman who deserved none of this. He felt a sudden, suffocating wave of self-loathing. What was he doing? This wasn't just a scam anymore. This was a monstrous act of cruelty. But then he looked down at the world below. The world of wealth and privilege that was finally within his grasp, and the cold, hard ambition returned. He had sacrificed everything to get here. He would not let a moment of weakness, a flicker of conscience, ruin it now. He gave Jenna's hand a squeeze, the smile back in place. "Anything for you, my love," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Anything at all." He caught Dimitri's eye. The silent pilot gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was time. The stage was set. The sun was rising on the first day of his new life, and on the last day of Jenna's, the silence in the basket was no longer peaceful. It was the silence of a predator before it strikes. And Jenna, blissfully unaware, leaned her head on her new husband's shoulder. A lamb nestled against the wolf who was about to lead her to the slaughter. The cruelty began with a kiss. Ethan, the man Jenna knew as Liam, turned to her as the balloon reached its apex. The whole of Napa Valley a jeweled carpet beneath them. The sun was a warm caress on her face. She closed her eyes, smiling, and leaned in to meet his lips. But the kiss was wrong. It was cold, hard, and brief. It was the kiss of a stranger. When she opened her eyes, the man she had married was gone. The face was the same, but the eyes were different. The warmth, the love, the adoration she had seen there for weeks was replaced by a chilling emptiness, a void as vast and terrifying as the sky around them. "Liam," she whispered, a tendril of fear coiling in her stomach. He didn't answer, he just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he stepped back, creating a space between them that felt like a chasm. He nodded at Dimitri, the hulking, silent pilot. Dimitri moved with a swift, brutal efficiency. Before Jenna could even process what was happening, he had a syringe in his hand. She opened her mouth to scream, but a large, rough hand clamped over it. She struggled, her heart hammering against her ribs, her romantic dream turning into a nightmare in a split second. She kicked, she fought, but she was no match for his brute strength. She looked at Ethan, her eyes pleading, begging her husband to help her, to save her. But he just watched, his face a mask of cold detachment. The needle slid into her arm, a sharp, burning sting. Her struggles weakened. The world began to tilt and blur, the vibrant colors of the dawn bleeding into a gray haze. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was Ethan's face, the face of the man she loved, watching her as she slipped away. The last thing she felt was the cold, hard floor of the basket against her cheek. When she woke up, she was in a cage. Not a literal cage with bars, but something far worse. It was a room, small and windowless, with concrete walls and a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. It smelled of damp earth and disinfectant. A thin, lumpy mattress lay in one corner, a bucket in the other. A heavy steel door with a small barred opening was the only way in or out. She was a prisoner. Days bled into nights. Time lost all meaning. Her only human contact was with Dimitri. He would bring her food twice a day, a bowl of watery gruel, and a plastic bottle of water. He never spoke. He would just slide the tray through a slot at the bottom of the door, his dead eyes briefly meeting hers before he turned and walked away. She tried to talk to him, to reason with him, to appeal, to whatever shred of humanity he might have left. But it was like talking to a stone wall. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the senseless. Why was this happening? Was it a kidnapping? Was there a ransom? She clung to the image of Liam, her Liam, searching for her, fighting for her. He would find her, he would save her. He was powerful, his family was powerful. They would not let this happen. This belief was the only thing that kept the terror at bay. The only thing that kept her from shattering into a million pieces. Meanwhile, Ethan was living Liam's life. He moved into Liam's palatial penthouse in Manhattan, the closets filled with clothes that cost more than Ethan had ever made in a year. He drove Liam's Aston Martin. He sat in Liam's chair at Hale Capital, surrounded by the trappings of unimaginable wealth. He played the part of the grieving husband to perfection. He gave tearful interviews to the press, his voice thick with emotion as he spoke of his beautiful, lost bride. He offered a massive reward for any information, a gesture that was lauded as a sign of his undying devotion. But behind the closed doors of the penthouse, the mask came off. The grief was replaced by a cold, calculating ambition. He was a quick study. He devoured Liam's files, his emails, his notes. He learned the language of high finance, the intricate dance of stocks and bonds, of mergers and acquisitions. He was smarter than Liam, hungrier. He didn't just want to maintain Liam's wealth, he wanted to build an empire. His cruelty, however, was not just reserved for Jenna. It was a tool he used to solidify his power. He found a rival at the firm, a man who had been a thorn in the real Liam's side, and he systematically destroyed him. He didn't just fire him, he humiliated him. He dug up dirt, leaked it to the press, and watched with a cold satisfaction as the man's career and reputation were torn to shreds. He wanted to send a message to everyone at Hale Capital. He was not the soft, careless boy they remembered. He was ruthless. He was in control. He would visit Jenna, sometimes. Not in person, of course. That was too risky. But Dimitri had set up a camera in her cell. Ethan would watch her on a secure feed, a ghost observing his own creation. He saw her, pacing the small room like a caged animal. He saw her weeping in the dark. He saw her talking to herself, trying to keep her sanity from fraying. At first, he felt a sick, twisted sense of power. He had done this. He had taken this bright, vibrant woman and reduced her to this. But, as the weeks turned into months, a different feeling began to creep in. It was a corrosive, gnawing guilt. He saw her face in his dreams. He heard her voice whispering his name, Liam's name, in the dead of night. He started drinking heavily, trying to drown the image of her pale, terrified face. Dimitri, the silent witness, saw it all. He saw Ethan's growing paranoia, his increasing reliance on alcohol. He saw the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking. Dimitri had been hired for a job, to make Jenna disappear and to keep her hidden. He had done his job perfectly. His part of the bargain was complete. He had been paid handsomely, enough to vanish to that beach he dreamed of. But he hadn't left. He stayed, watching from the shadows, for a reason he couldn't quite articulate, even to himself. Maybe it was a flicker of professional pride. He didn't like loose ends, and Ethan was becoming a very loose end. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something else. In the barren landscape of his soul, Jenna's quiet, desperate courage had planted a seed. He had seen men break under far less pressure. But she didn't break. She endured. She held on to a sliver of hope with a tenacity that he found both foolish and strangely admirable. He started to do small things, things that were not in his job description. He started putting a little more meat in her gruel. He left a book on her tray one day, an old dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. He told himself it was to keep the asset from deteriorating, a way to protect his investment. But he knew it was a lie. One day, he spoke to her. He slid the tray through the slot, and, instead of walking away, he lingered. "He watches you," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, rusty from disuse. Jenna scrambled to the door, her eyes wide. "Who, Liam? Is he okay? Does he know I'm here?" Dimitri looked at her, at the desperate hope flaring in her eyes, and he felt a pang of something he hadn't felt in a very long time. It was pity. "The man you call Liam," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "He is the one who put you here." The hope in Jenna's eyes died, replaced by a look of such profound, devastating betrayal that Dmitri had to look away. He had seen men killed, tortured, dismembered, but he had never seen anything as brutal as the destruction of a human soul. He turned and walked away, the sound of her broken sobs echoing down the concrete hallway. He had told her the truth. He had broken his silence, and in doing so, he had sealed his own fate, and Ethan's. The conflict was no longer just between a captor and his victim. It was now a three-way collision course, and the impact would be devastating. The book was the beginning of the end. Dmitri had left it on her food tray, a silent, inexplicable offering. For days, Jenna had ignored it, letting it sit in the corner of her cell. A symbol of the incomprehensible cruelty of her situation. Why would her captor give her a book? Was it another form of torture? A reminder of the world she had lost? But eventually, the crushing boredom, the sheer mind-numbing emptiness of her existence, drove her to pick it up. It was an old paperback, the cover soft and worn. To Kill a Mockingbird. As she read, something began to shift inside her. The words were a lifeline, a connection to a world of justice and morality that she thought had ceased to exist. She read about Atticus Finch, a man of quiet integrity, and she wept for the goodness she had once believed in, the goodness she had seen in the man she married, and then she found it. It was a tiny, almost invisible indentation on the inside of the back cover, a pinprick. Her fingers traced it, her mind racing. It was deliberate. She held the cover up to the dim light of the bare bulb, tilting it back and forth. And then she saw it, a faint, shimmering line. A piece of microfilm, no bigger than a grain of rice, had been embedded in the cardboard. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. This was a message. Dmitri, the silent, hulking brute who had been her jailer, had given her a key. But what did it unlock, and how could she possibly use it? She had nothing, no tools, no way to read the film. She was trapped in a concrete box. But for the first time in months, she had something other than despair. She had a secret. She began to watch Dmitri, to study him during his brief, silent appearances. She saw the flicker of something in his eyes, a conflict he tried to hide behind his stony facade. He was the weak link. He was her only hope. She had to make him talk. She started, leaving notes for him, scratched into the bottom of her food tray with a small stone she had chipped from the concrete floor. At first, they were just questions. Why? Who are you? He never responded. But he didn't take the tray away until he had read them. She knew he was reading them. Then she changed her tactics. She started writing about the man she knew as Liam. About his kindness, his gentleness, the way he made her feel safe. She wrote about their dreams, their plans for the future. She poured all of her lost love, her shattered hopes, onto the bottom of that plastic tray. She was planting a seed of doubt, watering it with her own pain. She was trying to make her jailer see her not as an asset, but as a human being. Meanwhile, Ethan's world was beginning to unravel. The guilt was a cancer, eating him from the inside out. He was drinking more, his nights filled with alcohol-fueled terrors. His days a struggle to maintain the facade of the grieving husband and the ruthless CEO. He was making mistakes at work, careless errors that were beginning to draw the attention of his father. The formidable Marcus Hale. Marcus was a man who did not tolerate weakness. He had built his empire on a foundation of cold, hard logic and brutal efficiency. He had been proud of the change he'd seen in his son since the tragedy. The boy had become a man, a killer, just like him. But now, he saw the cracks appearing. He saw the tremor in his son's hands, the haunted look in his eyes. He started to watch him, his paternal concern mixed with the predator's suspicion. The plot twist came not from a hidden clue, but from a human heart. Dimitri's he had spent his life in the shadows, a man defined by his ability to feel nothing. But Jenna had changed him. Her quiet, unbreakable spirit had chipped away at the armor he had built around himself. He had given her the microfilm. A half-formed, desperate gesture, not even sure what he hoped she would do with it, but her notes, her heartbreaking reminders of the life he had helped destroy, had finished the job. One night, he came to her cell, but instead of sliding the tray through the slot, he unlocked the door. Jenna scrambled back, her heart in her throat. He stepped inside, the door closing behind him with a heavy, final thud. He was a mountain of a man, and in the small, enclosed space, he seemed to suck all the air out of the room. He looked at her, his face a mess of conflicting emotions. "He is not Liam Hale," Dimitri said, his voice a low rumble. "His name is Ethan. Liam was his friend. He stole his life." Jenna stared at him, her mind struggling to comprehend the words. Ethan, not Liam, a stranger. The entire foundation of her life, of her love, crumbled into dust. It wasn't a kidnapping. It was something infinitely more monstrous. A replacement, the real Liam. She whispered, her voice barely audible. "Dead," Dimitri said, his voice flat. "An accident on a hiking trip in the Alps. A few months before you met Ethan." The room spun. She had married her husband's killer. She had been sleeping next to a monster, loving a monster. The betrayal was so absolute, so profound, it was like a physical blow. "Why?" she choked out. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because this was not the job," he said, his eyes dark with a sorrow that mirrored her own. "The job was to make you disappear, not to." This, he gestured around the cell, at the bucket, at the thin mattress. "This is a tomb." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, sleek satellite phone and a credit card. "This has one number programmed in it. The number for a man who can help you. A journalist. He is the only one who will believe you, the only one who can stand against Marcus Hale." He handed them to her. Her fingers trembled as she took them. "What about you?" she asked. A strange, sad smile touched Dimitri's lips. "I have my own accounts to settle." He turned and walked to the door, then paused. "He has a camera, he watches. He will know I have been here, he will come for me. You have maybe 1 hour, go." He opened the door, and was gone, leaving her with a satellite phone, a credit card, and a truth that was more terrifying than any lie. She was no longer just a victim, she was a witness. A witness to a conspiracy of breathtaking evil. A conspiracy that went far beyond her own personal tragedy. It was about a stolen life, a hidden murder, and a fortune built on a foundation of lies. She looked at the phone in her hand. It was her only weapon. Her heart was shattered, her world was in ruins, but a new feeling was rising from the ashes of her grief. It was rage. A cold, clear, burning rage. Ethan had taken everything from her, her love, her freedom, her name. But he had not taken her will to fight. She dialed the number. A man's voice answered, sharp and impatient. "Yes. My name is Jenna Hale," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I was married to a man named Liam Hale, and I have a story to tell you." The stakes had changed. This was no longer just about her survival, it was about justice. Public, explosive, and absolute. She was going to burn their world to the ground. The cinematic payoff did not happen in a courtroom. It happened in the glass and steel heart of the beast itself, the main trading floor of Hale Capital. The journalist Dimitri had pointed her to was a man named Ben Carter, a disgraced Pulitzer finalist, known for his relentless pursuit of stories that the powerful wanted to keep buried. He was a bulldog, and Jenna's story was the biggest bone he'd ever been thrown. For 2 weeks, they worked in secret from a safe house Ben had secured. Jenna, pale and thin, but with a fire in her eyes, told him everything. The whirlwind romance, the cold kiss in the balloon, the concrete cell. Ben listened, his initial skepticism melting away into a horrified fascination. He cross-referenced her story, pulling on old strings, calling in forgotten favors. He found the report of the real Liam Hale's accidental death in Switzerland. He found the records of Ethan's juvenile past, the connection to Liam. He found the disgruntled restaurant worker who admitted to poisoning Gus Armstrong's lunch for a few $100s. The pieces were all there. a mosaic of pure sociopathic ambition. The microfilm was the smoking gun. Ben had a contact at the NSA who, for a hefty price and the promise of a future exclusive, agreed to develop it. It contained a single, grainy video file. It was a recording from a hidden camera, likely a pen or a button, worn by Dmitri. It showed a meeting between Ethan and Dmitri just days before the wedding. The audio was clear. Ethan, his voice cold and precise, was laying out the final details of the plan. The balloon goes up. You drug her. You bring her to the location, Ethan said. No mistakes. No traces. She just vanishes. The grieving husband plays his part. I take my place, and you get your money and disappear forever. It was everything. The conspiracy, the premeditation, the cold-blooded intent. All laid bare in a 2-minute video. The plan for the takedown was Ben's masterpiece. Designed for maximum impact, for a viral explosion that would shatter the Hale empire. He leaked the story, timed to break on a Friday morning, just as the market opened. The headline on his independent news site was simple and devastating. The ghost of Liam Hale. How a con man murdered his way to the top of Wall Street. The article was a bombshell, detailing Ethan's entire scheme, supported by harrowing testimony and stills from the microfilm video. But the article was just the opening The main event was live at 9:30 a.m. As the opening bell rang at the New York Stock Exchange, a different kind of bell was about to toll for Ethan. He was on the trading floor of Hale Capital, a vast cavernous space with a 100-foot video wall that usually displayed market data. He was trying to project an aura of calm, but the tremors were back in his hands. He'd seen the headline. His phone was blowing up. His world was collapsing in real time. His father, Marcus Hale, stood beside him, his face a mask of thunderous rage. What is this, Ethan? He snarled, his voice a low growl. What the hell have you done? It's a lie, Father Ethan stammered, his practiced confidence deserting him. A smear campaign? Our rivals. He never finished the sentence. At that moment, every screen on the trading floor, including the massive video wall, flickered and changed. The endless streams of stock tickers and market data were replaced by a single grainy image. Ethan's face, captured from Dimitri's hidden camera. A collective gasp went through the room. The chaotic roar of the trading floor died down to a stunned, absolute silence. Then, the video began to play. The balloon goes up, you drug her, you bring her to the location. Ethan's own voice, cold and reptilian, echoed through the vast space. He stared at the screen, his face draining of all color. He looked like a man watching his own ghost. He saw the faces of his colleagues, his rivals, the people he had manipulated and terrified. All turned towards him, their expressions a mixture of shock, horror, and dawning comprehension. The video ended, and then, a new image appeared on the screen. It was Jenna. She was no longer the pale, broken woman from the cell. She was dressed in a simple, dark dress, her hair pulled back, her face composed. She looked directly into the camera, her blue eyes clear and unwavering. She was not speaking to the traders, or to the world. She was speaking to him. Double quotes. Hello, Ethan, she said, her voice calm and steady, but laced with ice. Did you miss me? The camera pulled back to reveal she was not in a studio. She was standing in a familiar place. The landing field in Napa. The exact spot where they had taken off. The sun was rising behind her, bathing her in a golden light, a mirror image of that final terrible morning. You took everything from me, she continued, her voice never rising, yet cutting through the silence like a razor. You took my love, my trust, my freedom. You tried to bury me, to erase me. You thought you could steal a life and get away with it, but you made one mistake. You let me live. Ethan was frozen, a statue of terror. He could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on him, dissecting him, judging him. He saw his father take a step away from him, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it was a final, damning verdict. He was no longer a Hale. He was just Ethan again. A nobody. A killer. As Jenna's face filled the screens. Two plainclothes detectives moved through the crowd. Their movements calm and deliberate. They walked right up to Ethan. "Ethan Miller," one of them said, his voice loud and clear in the silent room. "You are under arrest for the kidnapping of Jenna Hale, and on suspicion of the murder of Liam Hale." The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound Ethan had ever heard. It was the sound of his stolen world shattering into a million pieces. As they led him away, a pariah in his own kingdom, his eyes were still fixed on the screen, on the face of the woman he had tried to destroy. The final image on the screen was not of Jenna. It was a single, still photograph. A picture of the real Liam Hale, smiling, his arm around a beautiful young woman with impossibly blue eyes. A picture taken on a sunny afternoon, a lifetime ago. A snapshot of a love and a life that had been brutally, senselessly stolen. The camera, in the trading room, panned across the stunned faces, then zoomed in on Marcus Hale, the titan of Wall Street, the man who had built an empire. Looked old and broken, his face a ruin of grief and shame. His son was a monster, and he, in his pride and his ambition, had helped create him. The takedown was complete. It was public, it was brutal, and it was utterly cathartic. The story exploded. It was the lead on every news channel, the top trend on every social media platform. The name Hale, once a symbol of power and wealth, was now a synonym for scandal and murder. Jenna had not just reclaimed her life, she had taken back the truth, and she had done it on a global stage, ensuring that Ethan's crimes, and the name of the man he had murdered, would never be forgotten. The aftermath was a quiet echo, a long, slow exhale after the explosive climax. The world moved on, as it always does, to the next scandal, the next viral moment. But for those at the heart of the storm, the silence that followed was profound and permanent. Ethan's trial was a formality. The video, Jenna's testimony, and the mountain of evidence Ben Carter had unearthed left no room for doubt. He was convicted on all charges, his face a blank mask as the verdict was read. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, destined to spend the rest of his days in a concrete cell far more real than the one he had built for Jenna. He never spoke, never showed a flicker of remorse. He simply vanished into the penal system, a ghost in a jumpsuit, the name Ethan Miller, a footnote in a lurid forgotten story. Marcus Hale's empire crumbled. The scandal was a fatal blow to the company's reputation. Investors fled, stocks plummeted, and the firm that had once been a titan of Wall Street was sold off for parts. Marcus retreated from public life, a broken man haunted by the sins of his son and his own blind ambition. He lived out his remaining years in his empty penthouse, a king in a fallen kingdom, surrounded by ghosts. Dmitri was never found. He had settled his accounts and, true to his word, disappeared. Jenna liked to think of him on a quiet, sunny beach somewhere. The sound of the waves washing away the blood and the silence of his past. He had been her jailer, but he had also been her unlikely savior. He had given her the key, and in doing so, had unlocked his own cage as well. She owed him a debt she could never repay. Jenna did not return to her old life. That life was gone, burned away in the fire of her ordeal. She couldn't go back to being the trusting, idealistic woman she had been. The world was a darker, more complicated place now. But she was not broken, she was forged. She stayed in Napa. The place of her greatest horror had also become the place of her rebirth. She bought a small plot of land, a few acres of rolling hills overlooking the valley. She built a small house, with large windows that let in the light. She planted a garden. She found a quiet, simple peace in the rhythm of the seasons, in the feel of the earth beneath her fingers. Her mother, Carol, came to live with her. The ordeal had aged her, but it had also revealed a core of strength she never knew she possessed. They healed together, two women bound by a shared trauma and an unbreakable love. They rarely spoke of Ethan, or of the trial. There was no need. They spoke of the future, of the garden, of the books they were reading. They spoke of life. One cool, clear autumn morning, a year after the trial. Jenna walked to a quiet spot on her property, a place shaded by a single ancient oak tree. It looked out over the valley, over the very same sky where her nightmare had begun. She had a small, simple stone marker placed there. It didn't have a name on it. It just had a date. The date of the hot air balloon ride. It was not a grave. It was a memorial. A memorial to the woman she had been, to the love she had thought was real, and to the man whose life had been stolen. It was a reminder of the cost of truth, of the darkness that can hide behind a perfect smile. She stood there for a long time, the wind gently rustling the leaves of the oak tree. She was not sad, she was not angry, she was just quiet. The silence was no longer hungry or terrifying, it was peaceful. It was the silence of acceptance. She thought of the final line of the book Dimitri had given her, the book that had started it all. He was real nice, Mr. Finch. Most people are, Scout, when you finally see them. She had seen the monster behind the man's face, but she had also seen the flicker of humanity in her jailer. She had seen the fierce loyalty of a journalist who still believed in the truth. She had seen the quiet strength of her mother. She had seen the resilience of her own spirit. The world was not simple. It was not just good and evil. It was a messy, complicated, heartbreaking, beautiful place. And she was still a part of it. A car pulled up the long gravel driveway. It was Ben Carter. He had become a friend, a frequent visitor. He got out of the car, holding a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. He walked over to her, his face creased in a warm, familiar smile. "Thought you might like some company," he said. She smiled back, a real smile, one that reached her eyes. "I'd like that very much." They sat under the oak tree, sipping the wine, watching the sun begin to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. They didn't talk about the past. They talked about the future, about a world of possibilities that she was, against all odds, still here to see. The emotional echo of her trauma would always be there, a faint, haunting melody beneath the surface of her life. But it was no longer the only song she could hear. There was a new music now, a quiet symphony of hope, of peace, of a life reclaimed. The balloon had come down empty, but she had come back full.